Yeah, good morning. My name is Natalie Fanny Gonzalez. I'm the chair of the Economic Development Committee, and we're here for a second work session on the budget. We're going to start with Department of Permitting Services. Before we take it off, Bilal, do you have a few things to say before we pass it on to the department?
Sure. Would you like a review of the content in the staff package, or do you want to turn it over?
I think it would be great if you start. And
okay.
They can.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so good morning. Here to talk about Department of Permitting Services. The county executive has recommended a budget of $45.3 million, an increase of about 8.9% above $41.6 million, which was approved in FY24. DPS is an enterprise fund, and so its expenses are paid by the fees that it collects to render its services. And so it's not a tax-supported department in that sense. Or in any sense. The summary, as I mentioned, the expenditures have increased by about 8.9%, and in total there's one net new FTE that the budget reflects, and the rest of the changes are changes to either personnel costs or basic operating expenses for the department. There was one net new FTE in the administration division, net decrease of 2 FTEs in the customer support and outreach division, and then just sort of reshuffling. So there was a net increase of 1 FTE in the land development and residential construction and fire code compliance divisions as well. Sort of jumping around a little bit to some of the issues at hand for the budget consideration, for the committee's consideration. Sort of revisiting a discussion that has been brought up a few times over the last couple of years is that the revenues for the department have ballooned as a result of some increased permitting activity during the pandemic, coupled with artificially low operating expenses at that time because of the fact that people weren't going in the office and the one-time savings of moving into the Wheaton headquarters during that time. And so their reserves have increased well beyond their policy level of 20%. And so in 2023, they conducted a fee study to understand, what approaches they could potentially take to reduce those reserves. And so the staff packet contains a summary of some of the findings from the fee study and the recommendations, but the highlight is that the fee study and the consultant is here available to speak as well. But basically, they don't recommend lowering fees to reduce the reserves. And the reasons, as laid out in the staff packet and in the fee study, are that the large reserves are somewhat unsustainable going forward in that the fee study projects operating expenses for the department to exceed the growth in revenues. And so over time, that reserve would dwindle for that reason. And there's some analysis to suggest that some of the fees are actually not even recovering the cost to render those services, and so they're not they're not going to continue to pay for themselves. The fee study also recommends that looking around at peer jurisdictions and other best practices for maintaining a reserve, that a 30% reserve target might be better to account for, operational stabilization, revenue stabilization years where there might, in down years, to pay for technological upgrades that are required on a periodic basis. So maintaining a level above the policy level would help enable some of that, according to the study. DPS is planning an imminent upgrade to the permitting services, to the permitting system as well, and so there is at least one identified cost for some of the reserves. And because there's a large reserve now, maybe the action could be to take reduce fees on a one-time basis to bring those reserves down, but then that would imply that fees might need to be raised again in the future, and so that volatility in changing fees may not be desirable as an approach for managing permitting fees. So in summary, basically staff recommends the following actions for the committee's consideration, including: do not recommend lowering fees. Consider recommending a reserve of 30%, but within that 30%, pay for the technological upgrade that's being planned for this coming fiscal year, and then build back up to the 30%. And then the committee should just continue to visit the total fee amount and the fee basis on an ongoing basis going forward. Finally, just like to mention one other issue that wasn't reflected in this particular budget request, which was the committee's recommendation for DPS taking control of the restaurant plan review
Let's
function.
hold on that one.
From HHS.
That baby is on my packet. Just hold on that one. Let's just focus
Okay.
on the fees right now.
Sounds
and
good.
Before I have council members ask questions, Mr. Ravi Sabakan, do you have any comments on this study, the fee study, and the recommendation from the council staff? It will be great. And I know you have your consultant online, so I'll leave it up to you if you want that person to come in.
Yeah, well, good morning. First, committee members, I hope everyone is doing well on this Friday morning. Good to be back here. DPS, as Bilal stated, we are an enterprise fund, so, little different dynamics, as you know, as far as, how we manage our budget. It forces us to be, very careful in paying attention to fees and revenues, expenditures. As mentioned, we did undergo, as recommended by OMB, a fee study for this past year, rightfully so, given the fund balance issue. We needed to see, take a close examination of our fees. How are they established? We did a good look, the consultant that is, at surrounding jurisdictions, just to benchmark. The narrative is out that Montgomery County's fees are high, but the study actually showed contrary. We actually aren't getting cost recovery in a lot of what we have set up in our fee structure, but still no reason to establish or raise our fees. But the fee study told us a lot. We came up with recommendations, as we'll touch on today, about how to address the fund balance issue, and so we're comfortable with that outcome, and hopefully you will gain a better understanding of where we're going with that. But just in general, the past year, we've maintained the continuity of our operation, focused on our performance, and that's we're going to continue to build upon that.
Mr. Sabakan, can you or maybe the consultant come online and explain to us how do we, as Montgomery County, compare to other jurisdictions on this fee study that you mentioned?
Sure. Ian, are you able to touch on that?
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Give me 1 second here.
Ian is with a consultant selected PFM out of Philadelphia.
Great, awesome. Yeah, so what we did as part of the fee study was to benchmark the Montgomery County fees with regional fees, so Arlington, Fairfax, Prince George's County, and DC. Those were the jurisdictions that we compared Montgomery County's fees with. And, as you would expect, complete apples to apples comparison is very difficult because not everyone levies the same kind of fees. Even when they do levy the same kind of fees, the way it is levied is very different, right? Some of them is based on square footage, the others is based on cost of constructions, for instance. But our finding is that Montgomery County's fees is comparable to the jurisdictions that use an enterprise fund to account for their Department of Permitting Services. When I say comparable, I don't necessarily mean that the fees are exactly the same. What I mean is that some fees Montgomery County is higher, but some fees Montgomery County is actually lower because of how the fees are being levied. So all in all, when we look at all the building permit fees in aggregate, we didn't find that Montgomery County's fees were especially higher than the jurisdictions that use an enterprise fund to pay for their permitting services, and with the goal that cost recovery is the ultimate goal. So that was our kind of key finding, and I can elaborate more on specific fees or examples if that is desirable.
Yeah, Councilmember Glass.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ali, and thank you, Mr. Sabakan, for this. So I want to pick up on the point that was just made. I have two comments, but picking up on the point that was just made by the consultant. I'm sorry, I missed your name. Can you?
Vien.
Bien?
Vien.
Vien, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Vien. So the comment that you just made about our fees being in line with the regional fees, on one hand, that's good, right? That they're not higher. On the other hand, we have a fund balance because of the fees. If we were to, inject an octopus into this conversation. On the third hand, there is still perception issues that persist regarding the ability to do work in Montgomery County, and whether it is a perception of high fees, high costs, longer wait times or work times, whatever it might be to whomever has the opinion. I think we need to continue doing what we can to peel that back, to push back against that. And so I would like to put out there, for purposes of the conversation, perhaps reducing some of the fees if there is a fee balance, so we at least have some regional competitive edge in that regard, and say that our fees are lower if there is a fund balance, because we need to continue showing the reality, and I think that might be one way to do it. Again, given we have this rather large fund balance, not that the uses for those funds are not without merit, especially updating IT and some of those internal systems and processes. But I open it up for consideration amongst colleagues in the executive branch as well about that concept. The other question I have, the more direct question, is with regard to the commercial and building construction division, where there is a 13.6% budget increase for that particular division, and it is stated that it is because of increased in personnel costs. What is unique to that division and a 13.6% personnel increase?
Mike.
Sorry, with respect to the increase in the commercial division within DPS, that increase is attributed. All of our, DPS's budget is pretty much, personnel services. So what happened within the last fiscal year, I think there was some adjustments within staff. We maybe added a few additional within that division. There were no real structural changes. I don't know if Barbara Suter is our financial analyst that may be able to expound a little more on the details within the percentage increase for that division, but there were really no dramatic changes as the numbers may appear to indicate. Compensation is really what the reasons behind that percentage increase for commercial building.
So thank you for that, and according to the information I have that's in the packet, there are no changes to the division's 52 FTEs. But again, if it were compensation, isn't that across the board? Again, I'm trying to understand why there's a 13.6% increase just within that division.
Councilmember,
and if all things are equal, yeah.
If I may, I think, so the table on the first couple of pages where we pull out all of the compensation adjustments across the divisions shows that, that 90% of that increase across the whole department is for compensation. So I think it's a little lumpy because not all divisions are the same size. There might be different tenure and sort of seniority within it that leads to some of the lumpiness. But on average, the whole budget increased by 8.7%, which is consistent with the general wage adjustments and annualizations that have been budget-wide.
So I understand that rationale, but in looking at the chart, there are a handful of divisions that range from anywhere from 25 FTEs to 53 FTEs. So they're 2 to 4 dozen employees within them, and the budget changes are different. So I'm not sure that personnel changes, personnel or compensation is the only adjustment there.
Yeah, well, Issan Mutassidi, sorry, Deputy Director with DPS, good morning, and glad to be here. I believe most of the divisions, they have this increase, and that's mostly due to compensation. We have not added any additional FTEs, with the exception of what's proposed for FY enhancements, right? So there is, that would be the only explanation
So customer support and outreach has 43.9 FTEs, and the budget increase is only slated to be 0.3%. And then the commercial building and construction has 52 FTEs, but the budget is slated to increase 13.6%.
Correct, and the pay scale is a little bit different with the permit technician. As you're talking with the commercial, you have plan reviewer, senior plan reviewer, the pay scale is a lot higher, and that could compensate for some of the.
So this is succinct enters pay scale.
Right now, just looking at it, because other than that, I don't see why would it be 0.3 at customer support and outreach compared to commercial.
There's a net decrease of 2 FTEs in that division.
In which division?
In the customer support. So that's why it sort of offsets the wage increase for everyone else.
There you go. Okay, thank you. Because looking at it, something seemed off, and if it is simply the scale, then that seems to account for it. So appreciate you enlightening me on that. But again, I want to share with colleagues in the executive branch the idea. I do think we need to have a conversation about fees if we can.
I thank you for those questions. I think they were excellent. Can you please, the consultant mentioned that some of these fees in Montgomery County are higher than other places. Can we talk about those fees and what they are and what difference it is? Maybe if we can have this conversation, maybe we can target those higher fees compared to other places in the region. And I would like to know which ones they are and what's the difference.
Sure, that's a very important conversation to be had. The fees, again, as being pointed out, they're going to fluctuate. It's when you look jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and I've done this analysis even when I was in Rockville. We looked at Montgomery County and all the other contiguous localities just to understand, and what it revealed was just it fluctuates. You can point to specific fee types. For example, our residential, for new construction, that's how most building departments, generate the bulk of their fees through commercial large projects, development projects. So it's important to see what that factor is used to tabulate those fees. And so our commercial fees, I would say, is somewhat consistent, with the surrounding jurisdictions. But then you may see other fees that are a little bit lower, somewhat higher.
Let me interrupt you. I'm asking for detail. Which ones are the ones that are much higher than other places in the region, and why is that? Are they residential fees? Are they on the commercial side? That's what we're trying to understand here. Can you use the mic, please? Turn on the mic.
I was going to let Vian to go ahead first.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah, I can help comment on that. Before I comment on the details, and I promise I'll get there, if you can give me just a second here to broadly speak about why we didn't recommend lowering fees. In the last, DPS's revenues had been approximately about $44 million historically, if we look back 10 years. And all of a sudden, in the last 2 years, we saw the revenue spike above $50 million. And those, based on the long-term trend, we see as one-time events. Going forward, what we're seeing is if revenues return to the historical average of about $44 million, and there's continued compensation increases without even adding headcount, what we're seeing is DPS will start running a deficit. And we see that the deficit would be funded by, some of that would be funded by the fund balance itself. So even if DPS doesn't do anything, just by the nature of the post-pandemic building flux returning to the normalcy, we see DPS being able to bring down the fund balance from that perspective. We already talked about the technology piece. I don't need to comment too much on that. But the third reason the technology, the projected deficits once the revenues return to the historical normalcy. The third piece is the additional county initiatives that has already been legislated, including the Climate Action Plan. My understanding from talking to the Department of Operations is that there'll be a lot of operational changes in order to implement those plans, and inevitably, I believe the department will have to add more headcount, add more resources in order to implement those things. Given the significant economic uncertainty right now that we're seeing, given the technology needs, given the needs of the operational needs of the Climate Action Plan, for all those reasons, we see deficit having even a higher deficit than just kind of going from a baseline, driving down the road as usual. For that reason, we recommended that the DPS didn't lower the fees, because there was just so much uncertainty, and instead of kind of lowering the fees and then bringing them up, we thought it would be prudent as of today to keep the fees as is, see how the economy does, and see how the implementation of the Climate Action Plan goes before taking further action on the fees. So that was kind of the broad rationale. But let me talk about, to answer your question specifically about the fees itself. So I'm looking at the report, so I'm looking on the side myself here. If you look at the commercial alteration, Fairfax County, which also uses an enterprise fund, their fee level is construction cost multiply by 4.1% plus a surcharge, so above 4.1% once you include the surcharge. Whereas Montgomery County's fee level is 2.6%. So in this case, commercial alteration, Montgomery County's fee level is significantly lower, almost 50% lower than Fairfax. On the other hand, commercial new construction, Montgomery County's fee is 1.28 per square feet. And then for Fairfax, it depends on the type of new construction, but it's about 0.25 per square feet. So in this case, essentially those two offset each other. Montgomery County's commercial alteration fees are almost 50% lower than Fairfax, whereas the new construction is higher than Fairfax in this case. The other thing I would also note is the majority of a large portion of the commercial fees also come from alteration instead of new construction. And so from Montgomery County's perspective, a lot more of the fees actually drive from that lower fee base instead of the higher fee base.
Thank you so much for that explanation. I'm going to ask Councilmember Balkan so she can chime in.
Thank you. Thank you for presenting that. So I do have a question about the reserves, and I might have asked this question last year, and depending on the answer, I might ask it again next year. But the percentage of the reserve, if the purpose of the reserve is to look at having funding available for unforeseen circumstances and to cover revenue, I don't understand the calculation, the percent calculation of including the beginning fund balance as in the calculation. I would assume that the calculation would be the year-end fund balance divided by the revenue, not the revenue plus the fund balance. So am I looking at that?
I had the same question when I was starting to look at the numbers myself. You're absolutely correct in the sense that the calculation is consistent with the 6-year fiscal display in the budget itself. And I would defer to colleagues in the OMB in terms of why the percentage is calculated based on that base, but we simply try to be consistent with the county's usual practices in the budgetary documents.
Josh Waters, OMB, I would need to get back with a more specific answer in looking at the history of how the fund balance was calculated initially.
Okay, but the point is that, and the reason I looked at that, when I started reading the packet, I did just a mental calculation of what the fund balance should be, and it is twice as much as what I anticipated just by simple math. So I just want to clarify that the purpose of the balance is to cover unforeseen circumstances. So in my estimate, the fund balance is really 95% fund balance. I didn't just do the math. So I think that's a really critical issue. So you'll get back. So, but that changes everything that you know, the rest of the discussion.
Councilmember Malcolm, can you restate that?
Sure.
95,
so
that thought again?
If you look at Circle 8, right? So the year-end fund balance is $41.8 million. But the total revenue is $46.3 million. So the 50% calculation assumes the beginning fund balance. So it's year-end reserve as a percent of resources, not a percent of revenue. And I think it should be a percent of revenue. So we just need to clarify that.
Generally, it's a percent of resources available, since it is an enterprise fund, instead of a percent of revenue, because we have to make sure that as an enterprise fund, the general fund can't come in and support the enterprise fund if the resources aren't available, which is why it's calculated on a resource basis.
But
I'll need to take a look at the specifics of the fund balance policy. I don't have that right in front of me.
Sure. But when we look at the reason for a fund balance, and I'm not arguing with that, right? You're absolutely right. The fund needs to exist on its own without general fund. But if we have $41.8 million in the fund balance, what that essentially means is that we could go an entire year without any revenue coming in. To me, that's 100% fund balance. So that, I think that's an issue. So, and we can look at, regardless of how it's been, how it's been calculated in the past, I think that's an issue. And of course, that came on page 8, so I had formulated, my other thoughts prior to getting to that calculation of the fund balance. So I think that's important. I think in terms of, once we figure out, whether we're talking about a 50% fund balance or a 98% fund balance, I think that we need to talk about, I do think that it makes sense, and I agree with Ms. Leung that it's difficult to raise and lower fees based on revenue, and that might not be the best solution in terms of predictability and constantly monitoring that balance. So depending on the answer to the initial question, I agree that maybe we leave the fund the same and kind of continue to monitor it. Just because of the fluctuation, I don't think the fluctuation is a good thing. And then I do want to, I do support the use of fund balance for the upgrade. But that's a lot of money for an upgrade. How much are you thinking that IT upgrade's going to cost?
Well, for the permitting system, we're earmarking 3.5 is what it's a potentially north of 5 million. As we've had permit systems that put in place decades ago, and it was in that ballpark. So given 2024, we can only imagine it being in that ballpark or higher. So you know, we anticipated being, you know, clearly higher than what was
Okay.
previously, you know, paid for.
To be clear, you know, that's an RFP going on, and we can have a maybe offline discussion, and not being able to say how much it is, but yeah.
Yep, I appreciate that. And then I would, maybe it's not a fair assumption that the new system would produce some efficiencies in the department?
Absolutely. We're looking, we have an antiquated system. You know, we talked about the story with the last system that was intended to put in place, and that fell through. So we, in the course of doing that, we have not updated both our electronic plan review system and our main permit system. So we're long overdue. But all the latest and greatest amenities, we're really looking forward to those efficiencies, because they spell much more ease for our customers and certainly for our staff. And hopefully they'll be able to integrate the two systems. We fully, that's almost like a must-have as far as the new system. Those two have to speak to one another.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. And then just, I'm a numbers person, sorry. To go back to Council Member Glass's point on page 3. So that jumped out at me as well, and I understand that different departments have different pay scales. But if you do look at commercial building construction and the land development, those are roughly the same number of FTEs and roughly the same budget. The only difference is that the land development is adding a full FTE. So those numbers do, and similarly to the fire code, similar amount of, just a fewer FTEs and a little bit less budget, but that's adding another one. So those numbers do kind of jump out. So if we could just take a look at, just to confirm that those are just simply the formulaic calculation.
So if I could answer the question. When we put together the budget, the compensation adjustments are tied directly to each position. Mm-hmm. So our budget system does that. We go in there and put the parameters in for the adjustments. Mm-hmm. And so it's done for each position. And so when the budget, when it spits out its numbers, it aggregates those into those multi-program adjustments. Mm-hmm. But we will go back and just double check. I'll put another eye on it.
Yep. Okay, thanks. And one final thing, the residential fast track, I'm getting a deck built today. And when my contractor, when I was talking with the contractor, I asked him what he thought about the permitting. And he was thumbs up. He thinks it's great, and now if you could just do that to my HOA, that would that would help. Thank you.
What can I say?
Beautiful. Couple things, maybe on the fees. During the pandemic, a lot of people went to construction stores and remodeled their homes. I wonder if that had a huge impact on having this huge increase. I bet it does. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we haven't touched, after we're done with this conversation, we're going to talk about the restaurant licensing permitting situation, where we can talk about how this fund balance can contribute to hiring people to deal with this restaurant situation, but I'm going to hold my comments on that until we're going to get there. So I do hope that at some point you come back to tell us, because it's the whole updates on the website or the technology work that you guys are doing are one thing. Your balance for FY25 on the reserve is what, 46%? Is huge. So you have a lot of money there. However you're going to spend this, we need to know. So you're going to have to come back and explain that to us. Really, because the balance should be 20%, shouldn't be 46. Or 100, but it should be 20% for the reserves. So stay tuned on that, and we'll coordinate with our staff to see when you guys can come back to explain that. Councilmember Sells is next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director Khan and staff. I appreciate the overview and the packet that Bilal has put together. Just a few things that I noticed regarding, since my colleagues have already expressed concern over the fund balance that exceeds the recommended 20% policy. I look forward to the conversation of how we can incentivize or increase businesses by being creative with the fees that we are currently charging. I'm looking forward to hearing any ideas that you may have. And since looks like there's no support to lower the fees, to accelerate how quickly we can process applications. I don't know if that has any direct correlation with the fees, if that would speed up the process, if that would increase the workload. So looking forward to hearing more feedback about that.
Thank you, Councilman Sales. That's a great point you make in terms of our fees and the correlation to the services which we provide. To me, that's near and dear. You know, we have to be providing excellent service, just in general, but that is why we place a heightened emphasis on, as you can see, with our dashboard, being transparent, letting our stakeholders see readily how we're performing, what those expectations are. And more importantly, the accountability aspect, making sure that, we're held to, those measures that we say we're going to do. And, we have, that was the whole point of placing those, those data matrix on the website so they can see for new construction, for alteration, permit type. We even included the restaurant for you to give you a snapshot of, the performance. And that, that gives us a clear measure to show where we need to, step up and where we need to make those improvements without actually getting the feedback. It's clear. And so the correlation is there, and we fully understand that.
Okay. I also have another question about the racial equity and social justice score. I noticed that all of the departments are receiving a score this year on their budget. Can you describe any details about what you're doing to enhance this racial equity score?
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Of course.
I was waiting for that, actually. Yes, well, as the report indicates, we did increase, my first year. We get a decent increase, in our performance, but we want to be, at the highest. But it's not about the scorecard. We want to. The important idea is that, this is not an exercise in checking the box at the budget cycle. We want this to be part of our, our culture.
Yes.
And, we're talking about the vision of the county. We all want to see, this be prevalent and with all the departments throughout the county for diversity, equity, and inclusion. But it has to be just integrated within everything we do, our policies, our staffing, our engagement, and that's what I'm really trying to emphasize. Case in point, I went to the NFBPA conference in Baltimore last week. It was the first time I had actually gone in my career, surprisingly, but the first workshop I went to was on DEI, and it was really an eye-opener. And quite honestly, as a result, we have our annual all-staff, which sounds crazy that we meet in person once a year. The person who gave that workshop, we're now bringing him on board to come in and speak, because I thought it was very important, given how we're going to incorporate DEI in our strategic plan this year, that people, first and foremost, our staff and others understand what it's all about. I told the staff the stories, and you all, I'm sure, have heard when the Baltimore, bridge situation happened, and you saw the labels of the mayor, the DEI mayor. That to me was telling. Like, this is an opportunity for us to really make sure we clarify this, and so this is very important. So we're going to have that individual, great speaker, great motivator, come in and really speak to what the concepts are, the fundamentals, and I think that'll really take us to where the vision is as far as us, doing a lot better, with respect to racial, SJ and diversity, equity, and inclusion, so that people are comfortable and they fully understand where we're trying to go with that. And then hopefully, county-wide, it becomes, the norm.
Thank you for sharing that. We had our HHS meeting yesterday and had the same conversation. GARE is a national program that's available and so helpful for our leadership to experience with their fellow staff. So you can also look into that resource as well. Okay. And I noticed that there was a mention about barriers existing to collect demographic information from the businesses that you're working with, and so just wanted to better understand those barriers and how we can overcome those barriers.
I think that speaks to some of the challenges, and we're good at, as you may be able to see, in terms of giving you our performance review time frames and things like that, but those other concepts, those other data points can be somewhat challenging based on our ability to pull information off of our permit applications. What needs to be done to really gather that information? That's where we have to be a little more creative.
So how can you update that permitting form to ensure that we're collecting that information, not just voluntarily, but I'm not sure how this is done. If it's voluntary, if there's a section that says you can voluntarily, respond to this question, or how it's included in the form to encourage responses, because we want to ensure that everyone who comes in contact with DPS has the same experience, and we want to ensure that if there are certain populations that have different experiences, that we're doing everything we can to adapt and pivot to respond and improve. So.
Yes, ma'am. We have our working group, and that is part of the charge to figure those things out. Where we've had a little bit of a challenge in obtaining that. It's very important, as you indicate.
Yeah, especially if we're getting new technology. So just something to think about as we continue to innovate. All right. Thank you.
Before I turn the mic to Councilmember Glass, I just want to make sure that we have a question on the fees. So there are two situations here. One, if we want to decrease some of these fees, or if we leave things as they are and use that excess to pay for certain things that we need, including in the reconciliation list. And I'm hoping that the staff can come back to this committee with a recommendation. That's really what I'm hoping. So I'm with answer B. Yeah, after this. Yes.
If I may just offer just a little clarification on the plan, because it's not as uncertain. The fee study sort of suggests that there's going to be natural attrition, because if you add up operating expenses plus the interfund transfers, those exceed the revenues. And so that's going to eat into the balance. And I think one of the decision points was, and maybe the committee is not interested in this, but maybe considering a 30% level. Now, it depends whether it's of revenues, of the resources, and that's something that OMB can respond to with. But I just think, lowering fees was one option that I think the fee study pretty unequivocally says that is not the right solution, but also it's not, the reserve couldn't be spent down entirely through spending either, but they're kind of assuming that the attrition would do that. And so there's a question of what should the reserve level be, and obviously the denominator is important, but just to be clear, I think there is something of an understanding of how how the reserves will go back down to their policy levels. So
thank you for that. Understood. Sure. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you. So on this point, Ms. Leong stated that there was an increase in fees collected over the last 2 years. Mr. Sabakan, can you, or anyone else, can you expand upon why that anomaly has occurred over the last 2 years? Which helps, and this helps inform where we'll go with the fee structure.
I think we generally point to, as far as that, that increase, particularly during the pandemic. I mean, I know most building departments saw a shortfall in their revenues. Why did Montgomery County see, slight increase based on the typical straight line in the revenue? We attributed to the lack of spending. If you can imagine, during the pandemic, we were not going to training conferences, and which nobody was really. But things like that really, and with us being an enterprise fund, those funds were not utilized, and so that remained. Those funds remain, and then of course the accrued interest. We deal with that each year.
Sure. So that speaks to the balance, but what Ms. Leong specifically noted was the increase in the fees collected. Now, what you noted clearly the pandemic, and presumably during the pandemic, fees dropped. And so if the assumption is that, no, okay, so...
No, I'm sorry to interject.
No, please. I'm trying to figure this out, so I appreciate your help.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Glass. If you look at page 5, and I don't know if you have that in front of you or not.
I do.
If you look at FY 19, 2021, and really our budget, DPS budget, I've been at DPS for almost 18 years, and we are usually around 44 to 43, 45 million dollars. And if you look at FY 22, which is really representing of the year before, we are ahead by 1 year. That's during the pandemic, and then when really, once the pandemic has started, within like 6 months afterward, really we saw an increase in people coming to our office, applying for all sorts of, I mean,
right.
It was, and we can reflect those numbers. Right. I don't have the numbers in front of me, and if you look at our numbers of inspection, plan review, and everything that you see before FY22, it increased by 50%. And if you look, then it's going down. And so, for example, FY24, which we are the one that we are in right now, and it's going to end in like 3 months, we are showing 46. That was our budget. I don't think we're going to hit it. We are short already around 3.5 million, 4 million already. So we got still another 3 months to go. Last month we were down 2.5 million compared to previous years. So and March is usually our busiest month. We usually do like around 6 million in fees.
Thank you for focusing it back on that chart on page 5. So to a casual observer of DPS, it would seem then that the home renovation boom, right, and the discretionary income, and now we're returning to normal, which was the point that was made.
Absolutely. Everybody was coming back home, and they wanted more room, they wanted the outdoor additions,
So bringing this conversation full circle, and I'm glad we've had a conversation about it, the reserves seem to be temporary. We're going to reinvest some of that, the proposals to reinvest some of that into technology and otherwise, and hold on as we return to a normal.
Climate action plan, yeah, absolutely. I don't think DPS is in the business of wanting to increase the fees. That's what Mr. Savicon had made it clear.
Well, we certainly don't want to do that.
No. Right. That's the reason we don't want to lower it now, and then within a year come back in front of you. Why are you increasing the fees?
Healthy conversation. With all of that said, as we've turned full circle, I'm comfortable with staff recommendation and appreciate the suggestions the department brought. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm keeping track of the time because we need to deal with the restaurant conversation. Before we continue, can I get a sense of colleagues if everybody agrees with the staff recommendation to the 30% as Bilal mentioned, and you'll need to come back to us and explain to us how you're going to spend the rest of the balance that you have, which is great news, but we need to be responsible. If board members can please raise your hand if you agree with the staff recommendation from the staff. Okay, thank you. Is there anything else that you need to say now?
Well, it'll come out, and as far as the spending ideas, we have collaborated with the CE, and we actually have put in motion, efforts to look at some.
Yeah, you're gonna come back. I got it. Thank you so much. So now let's move. Yes.
Before this comes to full council, we need to have
Yes.
that. We need to figure out
before May.
whether it's 50% or 90%?
Yes, before, hopefully, because the last work session we have for ECON will be on the budget, May 2nd. Let's make sure that we can add it to one of the ones we already have scheduled. If not, we add a new one. But if we can add it to another one, that would be best. But yes, they need to come back. Is there any other question on this topic before we move on to restaurants licensing? No? Okay, beautiful. As you all know, once we established this committee, thanks again to Councilmember Evan Glass when he was president, one of the things I did was giving this tour with DPS targeting restaurants and listening to restaurants about their challenges opening businesses. And one of the highlights that I heard was the issue wasn't really with DPS, but mostly with HHS. And looking at how other jurisdictions are doing this, the way they streamline this process, that's how we started this conversation. And there is a proposal, and I want to say I'm so grateful to the county executive for allowing me to work with him on this issue to streamline the process so restaurants can open, not after 6 months after they sign a lease, but immediately. Restaurants are part of the economic development. They're part of making sure our communities are vibrant, and we need to support them. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Ken Harlan, if you can please guide us to
that position, or as much as the position as we can, and charge it to the DPS fund.
Which means that it will be paid by the DPS Enterprise Fund, which is
Yes.
great, right? It's a great
That's our
thing.
goal.
And we could have, because right now we only have one person under HHS dealing with this, and it's not even one, it's two people in charge of this whole thing. But it's like half-time each one of them, which is so complicated because you don't have one designated person. So this will help. I mean, if you compare it with other places around the region, they have like 3-4 folks focused on this. We only have half of them. We have two people in the half-time, which is insane, and one of the reasons why restaurants are so frustrated. Some of the meetings that I had with Robbie and their team, I have restaurant owners crying in those meetings because they were stuck with leases for 5-6 months and they couldn't open because their licenses were behind because of HHS. So anyway, I appreciate the partnership. There also could be, my understanding from legal staff, the need of having legislation. If that's the case, it will be, if everybody agrees, sponsored by the entire ECON committee, not me, the committee, to move this forward. With that, I'm going to ask if council members have any questions with this approach, that I think it's a victory for this committee because nobody has brought this up before. Actually, if you guys remember last year when we had budget work sessions, we didn't talk about this at all because this issue was in front of the HHS committee. I have no idea until we actually did the tour and I found out that that the problem was with HHS. So now that we know, this is why we're bringing it up. Questions? Councilmember Balcom, Glass, and Lorenzo.
So I appreciate all the effort, and I think that this would be, I think this is really important, and we've every council member has dealt with a restaurant that's been in dire straits. I want to give a huge shout out to Nothing Bundt Cake in Germantown. Thank you very much for getting that open and helping them, supporting them. I think that one of the issues that we just have to remember as this transition happens is it's not just about money, it's about culture. Yeah. And Mr. Sabakan has done a remarkable job of really looking at the culture of yes, and so I think that really has to translate. So regardless of how the money flows, the culture of helping the inspectors helping the businesses open has to be a through line. So thank you.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to extend my appreciation to your doggedness on this. Clearly, as Councilmember Balcom noted, we've all been dealing, throughout our public life with business owners that are frustrated and lost through the system. And as Mr. Hartman noted, and I appreciate I think what is helpful here is that if we create processes which are difficult to navigate, it is our responsibility to streamline them. And there are two things at play here. We are streamlining it for the business owners, which is the goal. There's still internal dynamics and fund transfers, right? And so we can deal with that, but we should be the ones dealing with that. That is our responsibility. If we set up these procedures, we can mitigate them. We should not have our business owners throw their hands up or have to call us to work through this. And also, Mr. Sabakan and the team, thank you. This is why this committee was created, singly focused on these issues that everyone knew existed, but quite frankly, we did not have the time as a body to drill down on it. So there's this issue, and then previewing what will happen next week, this committee as well is introducing legislation to codify the MOVE Act, right, to support business relocation and expansion in the county. And that was the direct outgrowth of conversations at the committee level over an extended period of time. And so I know there were questions at first about what this committee was intended to do, but 1 year in, after 12, 14 months of deep conversation, we're getting to work. You're getting to work so that other people can get to work. Thank you.
Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will continue to sing your praises. You've done an incredible job since you've taken over this department, and as we are looking to make continued transitions to potentially transition HHS staff and the responsibilities of the restaurant review process, do you anticipate any issues or concerns with the ability for DPS to take on the additional responsibilities?
Well, I mean, again, I say this all the time, we're all in this together, irrespective of department, branch of government. We're trying to make things better for our residents and our businesses. So we're going to do whatever it takes. If there are any challenges, on this review issue, I have the utmost confidence that we can work through those to ensure that we come up with a really streamlined process for our restaurants. That's the ultimate goal.
I love the confidence. That's what we want to hear. Go on, Ken.
And Councilmember Sales and committee members, the legislative fix is going to be complicated, and I don't. Dr. Ashford has been involved in discussions with us, because at the end of the day, under Maryland Code, this is her responsibility to make sure that restaurants open safely.
Yeah.
So it's navigating, threading that needle between the organization. It might be messy behind the scenes, but our goal is that the customer has a much more streamlined
doesn't feel
process.
inexperienced and have to deal with that. Because
And she understands that, and I don't know if you had a chance to chat with her about her, but she's been a fantastic addition to our team.
Oh, good. I'm glad and hope she'll be a part of this conversation because as we are celebrating the, high fund balance, the delays that our restaurants experience with these permitting delays just increases their bottom line when they are unable to open up and they still have to pay rent. And so I'm glad we are looking forward and streamlining even more of our processes. I yield. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So it sounds like we have support here in the committee, and if that's the case, I'm going to ask staff, Bilal, to please communicate, send us a draft letter to the HHS committee before next week. Because we're adding, guys, this is a big deal. We're adding 2 more positions by doing this. 2 more positions looking into restaurant licensing. That's a big deal. So the HHS committee needs to know that we're taking the decision today. I think they're meeting on April 18th. So before then, we need that draft letter and send it to them. Is there anything else, Mr. Harmon, that we need to on this issue? No, right?
Thank you.
All right, I think it's unanimous, right? We don't need to vote. All right, with that, thank you so much for coming in today. And next, we're going to have our WorkSource Montgomery NDA.
Appreciate your work.
So as people settle down, I'm going to ask council staff, Bilal, if you want to take us also. Thank you.
Thank you. The WorkSource Montgomery budget is before us. They're a non-departmental account, or NDA. The county executive has recommended $2.4 million, which is a 21.2% increase above the $2 million that was approved by the council last year. Just a brief overview of what WorkSource Montgomery does. They're the county's agent to implement the federal WIOA programming and provide local workforce development services above and beyond WIOA using the county's tax-supported funding. So just to reiterate, they provide services that are required to by the federal government. They get funding from the feds, the state as well, and then they enhance those services for the county using county dollars. And that's sort of the focus of the staff packet, because clearly, WorkSource Montgomery does a lot of things, but I think we're interested in how the $2.4 million will be spent. And so there are, I believe, 5 programs that they have that are supported by the tax dollars. Those are the Community Workforce Network to support training for immigrants, the dual track reentry, which is supporting workforce development for justice-impacted individuals, both while they are within a correctional facility, but also afterwards when they're out of the system and need that support. Skill Up Montgomery as well, which is a virtual career center. And then they have Sector Connectors, which supports workforce development pipelines between target industries that are of interest to their board and the county. The changes this year are somewhat they're not mine. There's a few specific changes. So there's the $10,000 to enhance the Summer Rise program, and to be clear, all of these would go on the add or new and enhanced list as per county fiscal policy based on the committee's discussion and considerations. But other than the inflationary adjustment, which is a broad increase across all NDAs. So there's the $10,000 for Summer Rise. If the committee recommends approval, and that would go on the new and enhanced list. There's $199,000 to support the correctional facility programming at the correctional facility, so one of the 2 dual reentry tracks. This is sort of an interesting situation because last year the budget did not include it because it was assumed that WorkSource Montgomery would receive $199,000 from DOCR. But they were informed in the middle of the fiscal year that they would not receive that funding, and so decided to shift their programming to keep the lights on at MCCF and maintain that program, but have indicated that to staff that without the $199,000 that's being recommended this year, that program would cease on June 30th of this year. So in addition to that, there's also Coding Our Way Home, $158,000 to restore a cut that the council approved last year of $158,000. This supports the Justice Empowerment Job Center. It wouldn't actually just go for Coding Our Way Home. It would go towards just enhancing programming at the job center generally. And so they're recommending $158,000, and if you were to consider what they had requested from the county executive, that could potentially be increased to $317,500. But regardless of the quirky situation with the correctional facility, all 3 of those enhancements would go on the new enhanced list based on the committee's discussion.
Mr. Featherspoon, do you want to share a few words about your work and highlight some of these programs before the committee asks questions?
Sure, and good morning to the committee. Always good to be with you, and as always, thank you for your continued support. I want to recognize some of our staff members who are here. Before I get into it, to my right is Jessica Isufu, our Deputy Director of Workforce Services. To my left, John Hattery, our Deputy Director of Administrative Services, and behind me, our Deputy Director Natay Gordon, who manages all of our administrative services, and Sarah Vanderwert, our Director of Government Board Relations. Also, bring greetings from our local Workforce Development Board, and we certainly appreciate all the work that they do. I know they're all watching on YouTube right now, so we appreciate you for that. And lastly, thank you to the county executive for his budget support and just overall support throughout the years. FY24 is off to a good start. Well, I guess we're almost done with FY24, but we were off to a good start, and we're going to finish it off strong as well. Just a few highlights from this year. We've really doubled down on system building and our work to build systems on the business engagement and job seeker engagement side of the house. And so, in short, there's a lot of efforts related to relationship building, continuously mapping our workforce community, filling gaps that we identify through the mapping process, implementing technology to better connect all of our workforce providers, which are 100 plus here in Montgomery County, and then having universal data reporting to demonstrate efficacy of our workforce system, not just the American Job Center or WorkSource Montgomery, but our workforce system as a whole. We've done a lot to expand programming. We are in the school system now, offering career coaching services to 6th through 12th graders. We have expanded our young adult programming for young adults ages 16 through 24. And we also, to date, have 9 job centers, which is a vast improvement and increase from 2 to 3 years ago. And so from a proximity standpoint, it's we're not hard to find, hard to engage with, whether it's mobile, virtual, in person, or whatever the setting. But I think, last but not least, and I always draw back on this, the number one job of a workforce board is to make sure that when people come to us and say we need help finding employment, and when employment providers, businesses come to us and say we need help finding talented workers, we do exactly that. And so in FY23, we helped over 3,500 residents gain employment. And when I say we, that's the entire American Job Center network. In FY24, we're off to a decent start through 6 months, or December. We have over 1,400 residents that have came to our American Job Center seeking employment, and they've connected to employment and stayed connected for 6 months to that employment. Business support, this doesn't represent the totality of our business efforts, but we're proud to say that we've deployed over $3 million of support into our business community, which has supported over 300 businesses and has resulted in over 600 jobs added to our local economy. And so those are just a couple of highlights that we are extremely proud of in FY24. But looking ahead to FY25, there are a lot of things that we're looking to achieve, and I'll just mention a few of those. As Bilal mentioned, our dual-track reentry program, which consists of 2 tracks, the MCCF Job Center, Montgomery County Correctional Facility Job Center, as well as our new Justice Empowerment Center, which recently opened its doors maybe about a week or so ago. And so we're doubling down on the work that we're doing for justice-impacted residents. And the Justice Empowerment Center is maybe not the first, but one of the few job centers throughout the state and the community that specializes and only serves those who are justice impacted, because there are different barriers that individuals face when you've been involved in the judicial system. And so there's a full complement of staff there right now. It's not theoretical, it's practical on the ground right now, offering comprehensive services to include transitional employment, occupational skills training, and job placement assistance. We're going to keep down the track of, we have to do this together. Our community workforce network includes upwards to 30 community workforce development providers who are doing outstanding work in the community, and we want to continue to do our part to help them expand their programming, but to also pull that network together so that we can have an integrated approach when we work with job seekers who have barriers. and it's not feasible to go up county, South County, East County, and West County to receive services. Let's pull the network together to collaborate and have an integrated model. Apprenticeship. Our job seekers, time is of the essence, and so earn and learn models are absolutely a priority for Worksource Montgomery. You probably know that the state has a goal of reaching 60,000 apprenticeships over the next few years, and so we want to be a partner to Montgomery College, to Maryland Department of Labor, to MCPS to do our part to make sure we expand apprenticeships. So we have specifically for WSM programs related to auto service tech with our partners at the Winata Automobile Dealer Education Institute. We are implementing a new patient care tech registered apprenticeship with our partners over at the Children's Guild. And so we're going to make sure that there's an enhanced focus on apprenticeship. And I think last but not least, this may not be the most exciting topic, but Worksource Montgomery, our Workforce Development Board, we published the county's 4-year workforce development plan, which is approved by the county executive, Maryland Department of Labor, and goes all the way up to the United States Secretary of Labor. And so this is a local plan year. And so we plan to engage stakeholders across the spectrum, economic development, chambers, nonprofits, K through 12, post-secondary, faith-based leaders. So we plan to have a really robust stakeholder engagement process to develop that plan. We do have a goal of not presenting the public with a compliance document, which is sometimes what it reads as, but more so we'll check the compliance boxes, but a plan to demonstrate how we approach system building, how we approach community engagement, how we approach business engagement, talent pipeline development, youth career education. So something that's an easy read that tells the story of who we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. And so with that, I'll close. As I said last year, there's much more to talk about or to update you on, but I'll stop there and say thank you again for your support, and happy to have a conversation and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Featherstone, and you do indeed, with your entire team, do a phenomenal job in Worksource Montgomery. I'm very proud to have you, and I think it's one of those things that is very special that we have in Montgomery County that you don't see in many places across the nation. Before I ask committee members to speak, it's not every day that I see a regional director coming in front of us, so if you would like to share any thoughts or reasons of why you're here today with Worksource Montgomery, please do.
Thank you, council members. I'm Jeru Bande, Regional Director of East County Regional Office, but I also serve as the person under the county executive overseeing the the workforce development portfolio. So we work very, very closely internally with the other people in the executive branch to just make sure that we pursue the county exec's vision for workforce development. As Anthony mentioned, the county exec's effort is really built around those 5 or 6 priority areas which are outlined in the documents that you have. One is the workforce system building among the partners internally and externally to develop a very cohesive, innovative workforce development ecosystem across all the 5 regions in Montgomery County. Really promote, strengthen the business as well as the community engagement component. That really serves to pursue a more inclusive and equitable service delivery structure for all populations throughout the county. But also important is the partnerships to develop and maintain a talent pipeline, which now I think is enhanced, will be enhanced through the Maryland Blueprint career counseling component, as Anthony mentioned very briefly. Important to us also is really the focus on youth career education, particularly when it comes to that talent pipeline development. But also critical, since we get federal monies, our focus is making sure that the workforce development system is focused on all the required federal performance outcomes, as well as the outcomes that are attached to our general funds, that we provide to the community. And I also do know the county executive is very, very strong in making sure that we promote inclusion and equity, giving communities, our business partners, as well as other stakeholders, a voice in the workforce development ecosystem. So we'll stop here, and hopefully through your questions and further delivery through the workforce development staff, we'll be able to answer your questions. But we are very, very pleased with the county council's support to the workforce development effort in Montgomery County.
Thank you so much for your remarks. We're going to start with Councilwoman Lori Sells.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Featherstone and the entire team for coming out to give us an overview of the American Job Center and WorkSource Montgomery. Recently, Councilmember Balcom and myself attended the event at WorkSource Montgomery where the Australian delegation joined us, and just wanted to know if you could share some takeaways about what that experience may have brought to the community, or what inspired the Australia visit, and any takeaways from them that we can adopt here in Montgomery County.
Yes, and thanks again to you both for attending. So it was inspired by a connection through the National Association of Workforce Boards. The Australian delegation wanted to see a board that was, I'll say, high performing, and our Workforce Development Board is that. And so that was the connection. That was the inspiration. I think, one takeaway was that workforce is workforce, no matter really where you are on the globe. Obviously their economy is different from ours, but we share some of the same challenges. Low unemployment, so a lot of the individuals that we see have more complex barriers, and so obviously we were able to share best practices in how we serve individuals, talking about also their apprenticeship model, how we work with returning citizens. And also diverse populations as well. Their diverse population set looks a little different than ours, but it's still a diverse population strategy. And so we're staying connected so we can share those best practices across the globe, really with a focus on their apprenticeship model, which is a little different than ours.
Oh, good. And do we know how many Montgomery County residents are currently underemployed or unemployed in the county?
We do know that data is available in our LMI system, Lightcast, where we can and we look at on a monthly basis. What's the education level versus the level of jobs available here in Montgomery County, as well as throughout the region. And so there's some levels where it's an even match, and there's some levels where you'll see that it drives underemployment. And so I don't have the exact number in front of me right now. Happy to follow up with that number once I can dive into our LMI system, but that is something that we track on a month-to-month basis.
Yes, if you can provide us with that, that would be helpful. I know in the packet you mentioned having 127 staff across all funding sources. Do you have what their roles are, or where they're stationed across the 9 job centers, programs, state and federal mandates, how they're broken down? I saw a flow chart, but didn't see how staff was dispersed. And I know that the Up County Regional Services Center doesn't have staff, so I don't know what their hours are, or who staffs, or when those hours are, but I've received word that there isn't staff regularly stationed at that center. So I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that.
Sure, I can speak to that.
Okay.
And so I believe in the packet there is a breakdown of the staff that we have, and if those positions are filled or not. They're spread out through out the 8 physical locations. One of those physical locations includes the Up County Job Center, where we do have staff that are stationed there regularly, from someone who works our front desk with our one-stop operator contractor, to management and career advising staff within our Title I programs. We owe a Title I programs, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And so there is staff there during the normal business operations of County Regional Service Center. But if ever you hear something like that, we're happy to respond to it.
Okay, okay. And then what are the chain of command for handling complaints or concerns? Do they come directly to you, or how are they fielded across the division?
We do have a grievance policy that outlines the chain which all customers receive, as well as it's posted throughout our centers. There are also other workflows for complaints and so forth. Sarah Vanderwood, our Director of Government and Board Relations, fields complaints from our elected officials as you receive them from constituents. And so there's multiple streams based on the stakeholder that's communicating the complaint, as well as including our, I didn't mention this before, we do have over, I think, 50 individuals deployed to the 68 middle and high schools and the special schools and programs as well. And so there's a flow for communication when there may be complaints within our school program as well. So we've tried to tackle it for all of our locations. Okay.
So I'm glad to hear about all of the programs and investments for our students, and especially with them aligning with the state goals of ensuring that they are graduating college and career ready. Can you speak more about the future you envision for WorkSource Montgomery taking on employment initiatives for our youth? I know you said you had 60-plus middle and high school students stationed. The Coding Our Way program, I don't know if they're youth who are being recruited for that program, but just wanted to know how many students are you serving through the program now?
So for the Montgomery County Career Advising Program, specifically MOCO CAP, and that's the career coaching counseling program in partnership with Montgomery College and MCPS. Through the first 3 months, we've been in schools prior to 2024, but we just started working with students in January. So through the first quarter, we have engaged over 16,000 young folks at MCPS, and so I want to clarify. Okay, so we've engaged over 9,000.
No, we've engaged 16,000.
Okay.
All right. Pardon me. Good morning, everyone. I'm John Hattery, Deputy Director of Career Education Services. We've engaged almost 17,000 young people since January 8th when we started delivering services in Montgomery County Public Schools. The 9,400 number is the response rate on the feedback survey. We have career coaches deployed to every, as Mr. Featherstone mentioned, to every middle school, every high school, and special schools. And they are charged with the opportunity to help young people discern their career paths that best fits them with respect to their strengths, interests, and values, combining that with John Holland's RIASEC code, which identifies themes from which we all kind of enter the world of work. And so far, so good.
And so of those students that are in the program, do we know how many are connected to jobs?
I'm sorry, ma'am, can you please repeat the question?
Sure. So of those 16,000, I believe you said 9,400 responded to your, was it a pre and post survey, or just a pre-survey or a post survey?
Post-survey. It was feedback on their engagement with our career coaches.
Okay, and do we know how many of those students were connected to employment?
No, ma'am, that's not our function in this case.
So they're just, or more confident about their employment opportunities after experiencing the program?
That is something we measure.
Okay.
after a very long career doing connecting young people and adults to jobs, and that being the primary metric for my work.
Yeah.
This is not the primary metric for the Blueprint for Maryland's Future.
Okay.
The metric there is ultimately the 45% of folks who leave their time at Montgomery County Public Schools with an industry-recognized credential, youth apprenticeship or apprenticeship. The other 55%, it is assumed, I believe, that they are going to be pursuing a college career. Our job within WorkSource Montgomery, and our charge within the mandate within the legislation, is to supply individualized career coaching, not job placement. It's a very different thing for us and for me personally,
Yeah.
but our mandate is to help young people discern their paths. Now, as it relates to specific job opportunities, we have an industry engagement department which is supporting many of the job fairs around the county and at many of the high schools, and there are young people that are getting jobs out of those engagements, although that is not something that we are currently tracking. Now, the other programs aimed at young people at WorkSource Montgomery are employment driven, and I know that we have stats on that.
Okay, so how are you evaluating the success of the CAP program?
Well, first and foremost, student voice. You know, we need to know what the young people are thinking, and so far, in its very early stages, less than 90 days, or just about 90 days, I can report that through their survey, out of the 9,400 who responded, the 9,400 young people who responded to our feedback survey, 4 out of 5 indicated that they were very satisfied with the engagement. 76% reported an increased understanding of the RISAC themes. These are those 6 themes that the U.S. Department of Labor uses to divide up occupational lists in what they call their ONET system. And we are in the process of starting our student advisory groups at every school. That's one of the things that we are charged with doing between now and the end of this school year, building that basis. We are somewhat flying blind as it relates to the data as we build this brand new program, which is charged to positively impact 90,000 young people. The state Accountability and Implementation Board has not yet told us what metrics they're going to be looking for. And so the data that we are collecting at this point is just based on educated guesses of what we think they may require. We are hoping to get that news very soon, and as soon as we get that information, that guidance, we will put those systems in place to be able to illuminate the questions, the data questions that they are going to be asking.
Yes, that's going to be very important. I noticed in the packet there was a mention of the ecosystem investment with 52% coming from minority business funding. I think it's Circle 21. Let's see.
I'm sorry, I don't have that.
Bilal, are you able to? Yeah,
See
it's
that.
from the Community Workforce Network on page 21.
Yeah, and so what this is a totality of all of our public workforce funds, which include federal, state, local, and of recent private foundational funding that has been distributed throughout our ecosystem to support workforce programming led by community partners. To date, we do have 25 community partners that we partner with to expand programming.
Okay, because I was just trying to understand the breakdown of the 71 businesses that were funded over the past 3 years.
And are you still on page 21, council member?
Yes. Because it says local businesses funded 21, 22,
Okay.
23, 24.
So that's not cumulative. that's year by year, and so it paints a picture of, in 2021 we had two partners that we supported, and how we've been able to grow those partnerships through 2024, and so there was a slight decrease in 2024. And I think that's mostly related to ARPA funding is a major funding source for those partnership programs.
No, it just says, because this is a cumulative 21 to 24, it totals 71 businesses. And so it looks like what I'm assuming is 21 to 24, $6 million has been spent to fund these 71 businesses. And so I'm seeing that minority businesses received 1.1 million. And so I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, and so just to clarify, and there may be an error on the report, but the 71 is not unique businesses. That is kind of
So someone
a cumulative total of the amount that we've partnered with each year. And so currently there are 25 businesses, but 71 is not a unique number of community partners we've supported. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, it would be helpful to understand how many businesses are being supported with this ecosystem investment fund. And then on page 22, the following chart, the Community Workforce Network. I'm trying to understand this chart because it says total residents served 4,060, and then unique job placements 371. And then there's no data for 2024.
Yeah, so the 2023 data is through calendar year 2023, and so that's through December. And so the next quarterly report will be published probably in the next few weeks. So we'll be happy to share that. And so the Community Workforce Network is a little unique from traditional workforce programs where we measure, did you get trained, did you get a job? A lot of our community partners are delving in barriers that need to be remediated to, I guess, stabilize personal infrastructure so that we can have residents be successful in their career pathways. And so every community workforce partner has I guess, a variance when it comes to metrics and so forth. And so some services may include professional development, which won't culminate in job placement. And so that's the totality of residents that have been served through the Community Workforce Network since we've started the program in 2021.
Okay. So I'll just wrap up because I know that, last year, I've been nicknamed the Data Hound, but, I recall this department coming before our committee last year and asking about metrics you're using to evaluate the success of your current programs and the populations that you're serving. And I want to ensure that those who are disconnected to employment, underemployed, are getting the support they need and can get it in their community and don't have to travel. And so I've asked some questions about some of the metrics that you've been using to evaluate and measure your different success across program areas, and look forward to receiving that information. And I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Balkin?
Sure, thank you. I appreciate you all being here today and all the work that you do. I think that what I'd like is after the budget, after we've had time with the blueprint, that perhaps we have a joint committee with the Education Committee when you think it's appropriate to share your experiences after the first year or so. I think that would be a great knowledge to have. I think that I agree with the budget requests that we have before us, and so I want to support that. I do think it's important in the budget process, we're going to, of course, we look at every single line item we're focusing on new and enhanced programs specifically with additional scrutiny. But I think it's very important when we look at so on the surface, it looks like both the $199,000 and the $158,000 are new initiatives, but really they need to be asterisked. My guess is that when we look at this list, most of it's going to be asterisked, but the program at the correctional facility, which is in my district, that's been going on for a long time, and so it's not a new initiative, and so I think we need to make that clear. And then the rest, the other 158, while it wasn't funded last year, that I think that we just want to make sure that we know that this is not something, these are not brand new programs, this is not brand new funding, and if we want to continue to do what we've been doing, we need to fund these programs. So thank you.
Great points. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you very much for the work that you do in the presentation. I want to piggyback off Councilmember Balcom's point regarding those two programs specifically, because it needs to be noted that the Coding Our Way Home program, the reason it was not fully funded last year was because of the late start. So we used those as cost savings, but it was a program that was funded, and you have gotten that program up and running, and it should be considered a ongoing project without any enhancements, and the asterisk is exactly appropriate in that situation. So I'm glad that's been gotten back up to speed. And with regard to the enhancement for the correctional facility, can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that's exactly the kind of work that we're trying to do, that we need to do, that we want to do, in that when people are returning to society, we want them to be fully equipped to have the skills to live their best lives. So can you lift the curtain a little bit more and talk about what these programs would be?
Sure, absolutely. And so, since the pandemic, we've reopened the job center in the correctional facility, and with our partners at Department of Communication, Corrections, and Rehabilitation, we've been able to, I would say, really enhance the level of services within the facility to set folks up for success post-release. But what we realized is that when you are released, it is not a best practice to work with a specific group that has a specific group of barriers and assume that your general programming will be able to meet the needs of these individuals, because they have specific barriers and their specific resources and so forth. They need to be brought forth to set people up for success. And so for the past year plus, we've been planning on developing a space that really mirrors what we're doing at the MCCF Job Center. A specific justice impacted job center that's staffed with WSM staff, Maryland Department of Labor staff, partners who offer support services, so that there's truly a warm handoff to what we would call a safe place, a safe space when you're returning home from incarceration, with resources and supports that are individualized, that are intensive, and that are tailored towards the needs of individuals who are justice impacted. One of the specific programs, council member, that will be operated out of this center is a transitional employment program. So coupled with support services related to, it could be mental health, it could be housing, could be referrals or integrated services to any one of those basic needs or basic supports. We know that attaching to employment quickly, and we know that doing something productive from a labor market standpoint and making money as soon as you can when you're released matters. Because there are obligations, there's a lot going on when you're released that we hear from our participants, and so that was the whole premise, is to make sure that there's no drop off when folks are leaving MCCF and returning to the community. But everyone in Montgomery County that has been justice involved does not come home from our local facility, and so this is open to individuals who are coming home from state facilities. You may be coming home from a federal facility all the way in Kentucky. So it serves the justice impacted. But the original premise was to mirror what we're doing inside on the outside, but adapt it because we can do much more when it comes to a community-based standpoint.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I look forward to learning more, right, about the success, the individualized success, and what some of those individuals go on to do, right, with the skills. That's a conversation for another time later in the fiscal year. And just to put a fine point on it, the $199,000, because it hadn't been funded previously, it hit a pause because of COVID. Is that the rationale there?
It hit a pause during COVID when we resumed operations in 2022. That's when it resumed. But up until this year, it was funding that we received directly from the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, as opposed to funding that was inclusive within our NDA.
Oh, okay. Well, so that begs the question, why, and might be to OMB or to, I don't know who to address the question to, why was that transferred out of the corrections budget? Yeah.
Okay, Julie Knight, Office of Management and Budget. What we learned this fiscal year is that it wasn't codified, I would say, in the approved budget for DOCR. Apparently, in previous fiscal years, they had provided it to WorkSource Montgomery through a contract, but it wasn't in the approved budget. And so when we met with their leadership, they basically indicated that they were going to fund that through their budget this year. And so what we wanted to do is make sure that we put it in the approved budget for 25.
Thank you for that. Clearly, it needs to be funded, right? And I think I could easily speak for the entire council in saying that we all support this goal. I want to put a pin on that budget, which is not in our portfolio, right? But if that fund was transferred, it needs to be noted in the public safety, and so I'll look at council staff to make sure that the public safety committee is aware of it, and whatever changes are made to that department is reflective of this transfer out. So I support this, and thank you.
Yeah, you took my words from that. It's the same dynamic that we have with HHS committee. So, last question from Councilmember Sales.
Oh, it's not a question, it's a comment. I just wanted to thank Mr. Featherstone for always supporting our Smart Youth Advisory Council, and I'm excited to see what will come with your Youth Advisory Council, and look forward to also supporting that endeavor as well. So kudos to you, and I'll support this budget request as well. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I believe every single council member from this committee supports the staff recommendation. Mr.
Just one point of clarification. I just want to clarify what I said earlier. The 3% inflationary adjustment also technically does go on the new enhanced list, but it's global. I don't know if I said that incorrectly, so I just want to clarify.
It's on the packet. It's the same thing as last year, but yes. Thank you so much for your work and your time, and we are going to be scheduling a joint session with Education and Culture as we did last year to follow up on many of these important issues. Thank you for your time. Next and last, we're going to have the UN3 Institute for Health Computing. As they approach, Mr. Tom Lewis, I don't see Judy here. Can you stay? And as always, Mr. Balal, Ali, if you can please kick us off, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you so much. So this is the final item for today. It's University of Maryland Partnership for the Institute of Health Computing, typo on the first page. This was a new item last year, and basically the county has entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Institute for 5 years to provide 5 years of funding for $5 million each year, and it was seeded with $15 million to begin with. When it came before the committee last year, still a nascent program, still getting set up, and so the committee realized that they didn't have space identified, and so some of the lease payment portion of the $5 million was withheld or delayed. So this year, the request is for $6.3 million, which would be the $5 million that they were anticipating every year under the MOU, plus the full amount of the lease payments that was delayed in FY24. I would just like to note that the increase was not necessarily being spent entirely on the lease payments, that because they entered into the space in December, which was halfway through the fiscal year. And so what they're proposing instead, which we lay out in the staff report, is that this money will be used to set up the center in other ways, like hiring staff, continuing to accelerate that hiring rate. And part of that is with an eye towards self-sufficiency, because the idea is that once the MOU runs out, the term is over, that the Institute will be generating enough revenue to sustain itself, plus its funding from other sources, signs the county. So I think the question before the committee is ultimately between the 5 and 6.3 million, whether the 1.3 would be delayed for another year, or whether the committee supports the activities that they're proposing for this year and believe that that's a prudent decision. So I'll let the University of Maryland representatives and the county executive representatives sort of explain what they're proposing and some of what's occurred over the last year.
Beautiful. We're going to start with Mr. Tom Lewis, and I hope that while you guys are providing your remarks, you explain how you're going to aggressively, hire people, your strategy. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. Tom Lewis, Development Ombudsman for the county in the County Executive's Office. Oops, sorry. Yes, so thank you. And so, first of all, I just want to say thank you to the committee for giving us a chance to talk about the Institute and for your support last year. And also, just take a note to thank Councilmember Sales, who was able to come on the site visit with our Lieutenant Governor Aruna Miller when she came to visit the site last a couple of weeks ago, and so had an opportunity to see the site and hear a bit about the work that they're doing. So thank you very much. Also, thanks to our analyst, Mr. Ali. He's very, very thorough and very helpful. So, with me today are the three co-directors from the three partners, and Dr. Brad Marin, who's the Senior Associate Dean for Precision Medicine at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, Dr. Sujal Vista, who's a Senior Researcher with the School of Computer, Mathematical, and Natural Sciences at the University of Maryland College Park, and Dr. Warren D'Souza, the Senior Vice President and Chief Innovation Officer for the University of Maryland Medical System. And I'll want them to sort of talk about all that they're doing, so I'll be very brief. But I did want to say just a brief note that because of the foresight of the council and this committee, and I would note, you noted earlier this morning, Councilmember Glass was during his time as president was actually when this institute was started. The MOU was signed with the county, and because of that foresight and the strong support from the council. This past legislative session, we just on Saturday before the session ended last week, the legislature passed a mandated appropriation from the state of Maryland starting in FY26, $1.5 million dollars for the Institute to supplement what the county has done. And then, so that will kick in next year to make it total, if the total appropriation for FY25, 6.3, then FY26 would be 6.5. The following year would be 9 when you count the state and county money. After that would be another $4.5 million from the state in the following year, and then the state has ongoing funding, $6 million a year into the future with no sunset on that funding. So it's really testament to your work and your investment here. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Marin.
Madam President,
right there.
Sorry about that. Madam President and distinguished council members, thank you for the opportunity to return here to you today, about a year since we first met, with some very exciting updates, along with my co-directors. We'll provide a summary of where we are, provide context to where we're going, the resources that we have that we think will get us there, and specific plans to make this operational and a huge success. So first and foremost, it's a pleasure to state that we moved in on site to our location in North Bethesda at 6116 Executive Boulevard, January 1st. This is a very transformative moment, put us all together in the same wonderful space with great proximity to the Metro stop, to Pike and Rose, and to other great local resources. We have at this point in time executed 47 MOUs for part-time presence on site. 45% of those are self-identified as underrepresented in science members. This is an important focus and priority for the Institute. These members span expertise in data science and clinical content expertise across the board, with focus on maternal health, cardiovascular health, cancer, pediatrics, and every other important unmet need that we face across the state. We also have formalized plans to engage with 3 branches of the National Institutes of Health, including bringing a 6-person team from one of those branches on site to work with us at the Institute for Health Computing. Just in the last quarter, the first quarter of this year, we have 51 academic manuscripts at differing stages towards publication. This includes work already published in the New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, and Nature Family journals, which are among the most well-read, most well-respected scientific publications in the world. We have submitted 26 federal and foundation grants to demonstrate not only our thirst for productivity, but also our quest to towards sustainability. We have our first major NIH grant that was awarded this year, and we look forward to expanding that in a number of different domains. So with that, I'll pass off to Dr. Bista.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad, and I'm so honored to be here today. Right. So we have 6 areas in the Institute for Health Computing that we're going to focus our research on, and 3 of them are from computational side, and since I'm a computational person, I will focus on those 3 areas, right? So the first area is applied AI, and I cannot overemphasize how much research is happening in AI right now, right? It's used in disease detection, drug manufacturing, health monitoring, right? And now generative AI is getting a lot of steam, right? And in the Institute for Health Computing, we'll be doing a lot of research in those areas. And it's particularly interesting that we'll focus on generative AI is because it allows us to generate thousands and thousands of images, text, and videos, right? This generated information will allow us better data summarization, better detection of diseases, improve resolution and contrast of MRIs, EEGs, right? Fill the missing information, and also go from one image modality to another. So that the ChatGPT is one of the example of generative AI, but you can use it for images, videos, and then a lot in medical setting too. So those are one of the areas we're going to focus on, right? And recently, University of Maryland announced a new institute. It's called AIM, right? It focuses on ethical AI development, right? And because whenever it comes to AI, we have to make sure there is no biases, right? So this, and this is very beneficial for IHC, is because the local institutions, with collaboration with IHC, will have access to more students now, and also academic experts. The second area is computational biology and bioinformatics. It all started here in Rockville, Maryland. It allows us to do gene sequencing and a lot of network medicine. And we found out that the widely used softwares like Top Hat and Bowtie, it all came from University of Maryland. So we're gonna, in this area, we're gonna do translational research by collaborating with a lot of biotech companies here in Montgomery County. And the last one is immersive visualization, right? It uses augmented and virtual reality devices. So they are very famous in games, but they have so much more potential, right? They can be used to visualize data set, they can be used to do interactive learning, right? And also remote medical assessment. But also now we are looking to use it in immersive therapies. So in immersive therapies, we'll use those AR, VR devices to mitigate pain, addiction, anxiety, phobia, and we're going to do a lot of research on that. And to handle all of the computational need, we'll have a very advanced high-performance computer, and it's going to be housed in Montgomery County, right? And we have already generated a lot of interest. We have a collaboration with FDA on AI-related project where we'll create a test bed to evaluate many AI devices. And we have also a partnership with Wipro. Wipro is a very big IT company with more than 250,000 workers, and it's spread across 66 countries. They're interested in partnering with ISC to do research in AI and visualization. So that is the update I have right now. Thank you very much, and I'll forward it to Warren.
Good morning. Thank you for having us today, and thank you for your continued support. My name is Warren D'Souza with the University of Maryland Medical System. We are partners with our two academic institutions, the University of Maryland Baltimore and the University of Maryland College Park at the Institute for Health Computing. We're an 11-hospital health system in the state of Maryland, the largest healthcare provider in the state of Maryland, serving urban, suburban, and rural geographies across the state. We have, over the years, made incredible investments in the deployment of a unified electronic medical record system that powers clinical care across our organization. As a consequence of that, we now house rich amounts of clinical data, which will serve as the foundational element for all of the activities within the Institute for Health Computing. These data correspond to more than 2+ million Marylanders associated with approximately 17 million clinical encounters. So you can imagine the science, research, and potential activity that this will unlock in the context of computational sciences, clinical care, and deployment back within the healthcare system that will benefit citizens of Maryland, all powered through the Institute for Health Computing. Approximately 40% of the patients we serve are Black. The reason that's important is because when we talk about computational sciences, this level of diversity is really unprecedented when you think about healthcare systems. And when we look to develop AI algorithms or computational techniques, it is imperative that we account for biases in the development of these algorithms. By having such a diverse data set, it will allow us to specifically look at health access, health inequities, as well as the development of technologies that appropriately mitigate against these biases in the construct of the computational advances we seek to advance. The data set is also ripe for potential public-private partnerships that we envision. For a lot of the core developments, the access to data is really the foundational piece to unlock whether it's the discovery of therapeutics, diagnostics, as well as the application of those computational advances back into clinical trials. The health system provides a very rich clinical and operational test bed in order to develop and then operationalize and deploy some of those advances in partnership both with academic institutions as well as industry partners. I'll stop there. Happy to.
Great. So I'd like to just make some final comments that speak specifically to our return on investment strategy and to the issue of recruitment. So as Dr. Bista and Dr. D'Souza mentioned, in addition to Wipro, we have active engagement with 7 companies ongoing right now between the Institute for Health Computing and these entities. These include companies at differing stages of development and also include Montgomery County companies, namely AstraZeneca, for which we are actively planning a data project that will use AI for early detection of lung cancer screening in communities that need that screening capability and for which outcomes right now are underperforming. Our strategy on role of return on investment focuses on innovation to build startup companies through our incubator plan. We have a focus on education and recruitment, and we also have a plan to expand our research infrastructure by bringing in clinical studies, all of which will focus our efforts on recruitment and amplifying our workforce, in addition to bringing positive visibility to Montgomery County in the life sciences and biotech space. On the issue of recruitment specifically, we have two main avenues forward. First, we will ramp up our efforts to promote and make visible job opportunities at the Institute for Health Computing through our website, also through job postings in academic manuscripts and publications that are viewed widely. We also aim to increase our visibility. Just this past quarter, we had media presence from Institute members in a number of different outlets, presentations for our data in local, regional, state, national, and even international conferences. All of this collectively creates a very attractive signature to our productivity and will contribute to scaled-up efforts for recruitment.
Can you speak more about the profile of the people you're looking to hire? And specifically, I want to understand more what type of degrees you're looking for. And this will inform the joint work session, and the second joint session that we're going to have with education in this committee. Are you looking for folks who may just have a technical degree? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we can probably share that answer. I'll start by saying that we have a focus on recruiting members across the training and experience profile. So we want students, we want fellows, we want young faculty, we want senior faculty. We want individuals with medical degrees, but we also want data scientists with PhD degrees. We want individuals that can add an enriched viewpoint to our clinical research and our overall mission. That's an important aspect of our overall goals.
So each project will have different requirement, and we are planning to hire a lot of undergraduate students, grad students, and postdocs for a majority of the work. But
what about those students who have only a technical degree? Like, I'm thinking Montgomery College.
So we will have a summer internships or in the regular semester we'll have opportunities for where they can apply for internship, because each project will require a lot of different technical capabilities, right? And we can also teach students like how to work on those.
Are these internships paid internships?
Yes.
Okay, because otherwise it's just not going to work. If we want to increase especially having more people of color getting into this field, we need to pay folks. Okay, and so how are your relationships with Montgomery College and the Universities of Shady Grove, and even MCPS? How are you making sure that you're recruiting the next generation of scientists that can work for you?
We have an obligation to be inclusive in this regard, so we have already started a formal partnership with University of Shady Grove through correspondence with the president of that campus. So we're in the works for co-recruitment of individuals that can share time between the Institute and Shady Grove. And I will let Dr. Bista comment on Montgomery College.
So we will have like small course curriculum, right, where we can teach students with various skills to adapt to the changes that we are onto the. Like when you let's say if someone wants to work on AI, right, that might require certain skills, right? So we will have some classes or events or symposiums, right, where people can come in and then they will go through that process and then they will learn something and then they can work with us for either summertime or in the regular semester.
And maybe it's too early for you guys, but you have not talked to MCPS at all. I'm thinking, my daughter, I'm sorry, it's in middle school, and she's in the technology and engineering program for middle school. I mean, how amazing it will be for your organization to reach out to middle school students and who are already into this type of field and get them in the track to be, so by the time they get to middle school, they're already in, and so, natural employees for you guys.
Absolutely. We actually do have ongoing programs that aim to interface with public school students at different stages of the education pipeline. At present, we have a member, Rosalina McCoy, who's launching an educational initiative to bring in students into the Institute, into our capacity to teach at early stages, which we think is not only important for community enrichment, but it is, in fact, particularly important for people that otherwise identify as underrepresented in science, where we know attrition towards that path as a professional career tends to be earlier than others. So we aim to seize that opportunity and try to leverage that into a positive.
Beautiful, but just start thinking middle school, not just high school, making sure that's clear here. Any questions from my colleagues? Who wants to start? Okay. Councilmember Sells, and then Balcom, and then Glass.
Okay, thank you. Not really a question, more so just a comment. My background's in public health, and so I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I worked at the National Institutes of Health. My first job was with the National Human Genome Research Institute, and so I'm excited about the potential partnerships that will come. And I just had a bachelor's degree. I was the outreach and recruitment coordinator, so I did not get involved with the bioinformatics that help map the African American genome. And so I'm excited about the possibilities that are coming. Montgomery County is home to 4 of the most diverse cities in the country, and so this is groundbreaking research that's going to come, and I love the dedication to casting a wide net, because we want to recruit the best and brightest from all over, and we want them to make Montgomery County their home. We want them to move here, and we want them to bring their expertise here. And we also want to ensure that we're also growing from our people here as well. So I'm just excited about this endeavor. I can't believe it's only been 6 months having looked at this space. I'm excited for what's to come, and I know with you three here and the rest of the incredible team that I met a few weeks ago with the Lieutenant Governor, we are primed for a very successful future here in Montgomery County. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. And thank you. It's very exciting to hear everything that's going on. So just for the issue at hand, my feeling is that I would like to move forward with the 6.3. This isn't a reimbursement grant. It is an MOU, and we have made a commitment, and I feel strongly that we meet that commitment.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Again, very exciting. I support the executive recommendation and continuation of the work. We know this is a multi-year effort, and so I'm also glad to hear that the General Assembly has committed state dollars to this, which is great. Thank you to our delegation. I think this location sits at the intersection of a few legislative districts, so I'll just say thank you to everybody there. And I just have a kind of a general question. As you are working to attract folks from around the country, and you mentioned a few dozen contractors or folks that are signed up for various lengths of time, I'm curious what the appeal is for them, right? Share with us, as we all want to share the same excitement and share the same talking points. What are you hearing directly from the people who are signing up to come here and, about the community, about this project, about the research, about the cohort, right? Clearly best and brightest, so that's also an appeal. But share with us so that we can continue sharing with others. I'll open it up to all of you.
Yeah, I think we probably all have some contributions. This is a very important question. Thank you for asking. It's critical that we clearly state our differentiating features compared to other institutions around the country that may be pursuing something similar. The fact of the matter is that we are unique because we bring together into the same space world-renowned expertise in computer science, world-renowned expertise in clinical content and the management of patients, and a truly precious resource in the medical system, which is distributed across 22 out of the 25 counties in Maryland. So that together in one place is truly unique, and it allows us to conceive ideas from theory and implement them into practice at the neighborhood level across a vast geography. That's not something that can be done almost anywhere else that I'm familiar with.
So we are in Capital Biotech Hub, right? So we are third in the nation, but what we have is proximity to NIH, FDA, right? And those are very valuable to a lot of companies, right? And when we have these resources that we're going to have a very powerful high-performance computers, and then we have expertise in the clinical side, expertise in the computational side, and we have the data sets, right? So it's very attractive to individuals who are working in that space, because you can have a partnership with these federal agencies, a lot of biotech companies you can partner with, and also you have this backing from from an institution that can provide a lot of computational and other resources.
Thank you. Dr. Souza? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would just add to, I think it's the co-location of the intellectual capital, but it's also the co-location of the mission of the Institute, which is not esoteric by any stretch, but born out of the need for inserting computational sciences into healthcare and into medicine. That coupled with the juxtaposition to federal agencies and the Montgomery County corridor and the attraction to adjacent entities, both federal as well as industry, is certainly a draw for talent to come and locate themselves adjacent to the Institute.
I'm glad to hear this. Mr. Lewis, did you have anything else you were on?
Oh, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't forget to mention that the co-directors would really like to have the entire subcommittee have a chance to come and visit sometime when your budget crunch is
That's
is
it.
passed.
Yes. I look forward to that field trip, and I will just say thank you for saying what I and we know to be true. Last October, the county executive and I went to India and Vietnam on an economic development mission and said exactly what you all said. And I'm glad to know that there are people listening and agreeing with us, and that's translating into the expansion of this startup. I mean, there's no other way to put it. This is a startup, and it is already proving itself and its worth. And thank you all for your leadership, and look forward to that trip after the budget. So thank you.
Thank you. And this committee is known for doing field trips. We went to the data center. We have been to Loudoun County for the agritourism. There's another one coming up that I haven't shared with you all, but there's one on incubators at some point, and then you guys. So we're just going to add that to the list. It sounds like everybody's in agreement with the county executive proposal of $6.3 million. And I see Mr. Ballon.
I just want to clarify, I think consistent with county fiscal policy, the $1.3 million above the $5 million would go in the new and enhanced programs.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
It has to. And with that, do you have something else, Mr. Herman?
Well, I didn't know if that was, it's the council's policy on, as far as a new program, it's a deferred expenditure from last year.
Should we do another asterisk?
Can we have the deputy please come up and explain council staff's position?
Thank you very much, Craig Howard. Obviously, everything doesn't fit neatly into a nice little box as we're going through this process, and the MOU with the executive has signed with the universities for $5 million per year. The council has appropriation authority, and last year decided to approve less than the $5 million because the money was not needed for the purpose that it was expressed for the leases. So this year, the executive has decided to put that additional funding back in, but it is an enhancement. So that is why it needs to show from the council's perspective on that list. It does not speak to the worthiness of the funding, just where it will show in the list as the council reviews all proposed expenditures for inclusion in the FY25 budget.
Councilmember Alkin, do you have a question?
No, I agree. Team asterisk.
Exactly. So we make it absolutely clear that this is part of our mission to ensure that Montgomery County will be the first place in the nation to lead on life sciences, and this investment is necessary. So we'll make sure that the staff report says that.
Yes.
With that, I thank you so much for the love and commitment that you have to this county and everything that you're doing for us. And do you have something else to say?
No, just to thank you for the support. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
You are very welcome, and we look forward to seeing every single person that you're going to be hiring very soon. And with that, this committee is adjourned. Thank you.